this is a program that got rained out, and by popular demand, they demanded that we talk about it. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look out the window yet or around where we've been going all day today with Day of Giving, but spring has definitely arrived and in full force. So what we want to talk about is how to prep your beds for spring. And there's a couple things I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to do some demonstration of stuff. One of the most important things to do with some of your spring bed prep is to kind of cut things back. If you've got perennials that are ready to be cut back, if you've got hydrangeas that need to be cleaned up, those are all things you kind of do leading up to actually working in your beds. So those are important things to do. I've got a kind of a blank canvas here that I'm going to talk about some things, but something that we talk about a lot with working in your gardens is checking with your soil before you do anything, before you add any amendments, before you even think about fertilizer. You may not need it. Even things like the structure of your soil, if it's moist, if it's dry, if it's heavy, all those things can be found out with a soil test. So the first thing I want to do is talk about that and show you all those things. And you can go to any extension office, and I can't remember when it's free. I think it's free up until the first part of April, and then it's a very small charge. But they have these boxes there, and you get your box, you go online, and probably where you get your box, they've got the form. You fill out the form based on what you're looking for. If it's vegetables, if it's woody things, this has all the crops and all the forages on there as well. Unless you've got a mighty big garden and you're growing hay and buckwheat or things like that, you don't have to worry about that. But it specifies exactly what you're going to be looking for your garden soil to get your landscape plants to perform. So get these two items, and if you're lucky enough to have a soil probe, this is just a metal tool. This one's aluminum. It's got a little hole in the bottom, and that'll get little soil cores. And you don't want to go super deep. 6 to 8 inches is fine. And you just go around your garden bed and get these little plugs out and put them in a bucket. And you don't want to go in one spot. You want to go through your whole garden bed so you get a broad representation of what you're going to need from a nutritional standpoint. So get a whole bunch of those. And for the sake of time, I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. If you're not so lucky to have one of these, any garden tool will work, a spade, a trowel, whatever, and just get your soil samples that way. And it's best to do this when the soil's not super wet. You want this to be a little bit dry. It takes them longer to analyze it if it's wet. Mix that up really good, like you're making a cake or something. And just pour that in your box. And I'm going to tell you the most important part of that is follow the directions on how to close. Close first, close second. And it's like closing a box of crackers. Or if you're like me, you just leave it open because you're in them all the time. And the very most important thing is write your name on the box. It doesn't matter if you have the paper. If you don't have your name on the box, they don't know whose soil that is. There's a level line on here. Be kind to the people that are reading this and don't go above that line, but put your name and your address on the box. That way they can trace this to your paperwork. It takes, depending on the time of the year, 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes quicker. The turnaround depends on how many other people are in front of you in terms of submitting their soil. Once you have this information, they look at your requirements. They'll send you a report back via your email, and it'll tell you what you need to add to your soil. So very important, very easy to do. Take broad samples all through your garden bed. If you've got multiples, go to different parts of your yard, have different samples. But this is a really simple way to start off kind of on the right foot. So the next thing is adding some organic matter. There is such a thing as adding too much. I'm going to add a little bit of that because we have it on site. What we use is just a leaf compost, really good organic matter that's already broken down, and it's nice, rich material. all leaf compost from the university. They dump their leaves on site. We turn them over and get it to this point where it's nice and broken down. We also have a composting facility on campus that we get compost from, but we're very lucky to have this resource. So I'm just going to dump this in the bed and kind of spread it around a little bit. And if I was smart, I would have brought a rake. And I don't know if anybody at home maybe wants to sock. It's always fun to see what's in the compost. So the thickness of this kind of depends on if you get a soil sample back. And it says you need more organic matter. This bed already has a lot of organic matter in it, so I'm only going like 2 to 3 inches, and that's all that I brought with me. So this is just enough, I think. And the next process, for those of you that have seen me talk about tools and did my tool workshop, I like these cultivating forks. They're good for turning it over. A shovel works just as good, and I'm hoping this is kind of loose. And all that does is break up the soil and get that organic matter down in the soil so it can start doing its thing and working up all those, bringing that organic matter down into the soil so it'll start to break down. So a much faster way to do this, I know you're all thinking it, would be to get a rototiller. And a couple cautions about that. Rototillers you don't want to get around other existing plants. If I had trees kind of in the area, and we've got some big trees behind me, there might be some roots in here. If you've got a free bed, if it's vegetables or a brand new bed where you don't have to worry about, that's going to really incorporate it really, really well and mix all those layers together. They make different size ones. They make real small ones. I like those small ones because if you don't have a truck, you can fit those in the back of your car easy, and they're perfect for tilling up garden beds that you're changing out every year. If it's annuals or perennials or things like that, it works perfect for that kind of situation. But this is much better exercise. You get to turn that soil over and really get to see all that organic matter kind of going down and interacting with that. So other things that you would do from a bed prep perspective, we're lucky to have a nice little wall here, but this is an opportune time to kind of edge your beds if you want to, just creating that edge so that when you're done and you mulch, it's going to be nice and neat, and it's going to catch that mulch and keep it in contact with the bed. But you're in this process of cleaning up perennials, raking, adding compost, doing that edge. That's a good time to do that when you're mixing the soil around, and that's something else that's already done. We've got a nice edge here, so I'm not going to worry about that. So you've gone through this process, you've got your soil sample, you've incorporated your organic matter, you've got that all mixed together. What's next? For us here, I brought a couple things up to plant. In the process of getting things out of our nursery that have kind of been there for a while, I brought a couple things up. Tim and I went and did some shopping down in the nursery, and we got a nice pineapple guava here. And since my boss is here watching, I'm going to be sure not to put him too close to other things. And this is a barberry. There's a lot of barberry up in this part of the garden, and I love the flowers on this. It's one of those genus of plants that kind of gets a bad rap, but this is one that's behaved. It's not one that kind of seeds around, and I wanted it for this color, and there's quite a few of them up in this part of the garden anyway. And we are getting in perennials for our plant sale and for Raulston blooms. And this particular bed does not get irrigation. So the plants that I've also chosen can take a little bit of tough love. So both of these plants, the woody things, are things that can take a little bit of tough love. They're going to get watered, but they're going to be last in line when we're going full guns in the summertime. So I got some perennials that are kind of in that same vein. Some sedums that can take a little bit of dry, that don't like wet feet. And this is an agastache that Tim it's one of his favorites. It's guava lava. And Alexander, there's some flowers on that one. I don't know if you can see them or not. But this is another one of those tough, takes tough love kinds of plants that is great for pollinators and butterflies. The common name is actually hummingbird mint. And the colors kind of all go together loosely. So I've tried to space things out pretty good. How's it look from that perspective? Okay, thumbs up on planting. And I'm not gonna plant all of these, though I probably could in the time allotted. But I wanna talk about that too, because that's an important part of this whole process, is planting at the right depth, making sure that you're not putting those crowns where they're going to get wet and cause problems. That's more of a thing with one of the woody plants, and I think I'll start with that one. I say this knowing you're an educated audience, but I say it because I have seen where people plant things without taking them out of the pot. But that's the first step, is take it out of the pot, very important. And these haven't been in there real long, but we've talked about planting quite a bit on here, and it's very important to kind of break up, get it out of that circle so that the roots are going to go out into the new soil. It's not as crucial with this particular plant. It hasn't been in the pot that long, but if you don't do that, the chances of it branching out are kind of slow, and in some cases it won't do that, and the roots will continue to grow and girdle themselves. This is going in nice, good soil. It has been stepped up at the right rate. It started out at a small plant and made its way up to this gallon size, but I'm gonna rough that out just a little bit more. And sometimes this soilless mix will almost be hydrophobic. It'll pull water away from it. And I'm being kind today. Normally I would hack at this to no end. But that's pretty good. You can see the roots are starting to go out in different directions. And I've pulled it away from this little kind of root flare area. Not as crucial with shrubs as trees, but there is a good amount of soil on top of the pot also. And as I get older, I like tools I can work on my knees with. So that's about the right height, and looking at that as kind of a leveling standpoint, that's about the right height that I want. And you don't want to stomp that in with your foot. You want to put it in there kind of softly and tamp it down with your hand, because you want there to be air for the roots to grow into. And if you compact it by stomping on it, you're going to inhibit that to a certain degree. So if you look at that, it looks a little bit high, and I brought some mulch in here to kind of bring that level up, so it'll be at the right depth. Same rules apply more or less for perennials. And depending on what you're planting, it may have a vigorous root system, and that's not too bad. But I'm going to break this up also. So you can see how it went down a little bit in size from that. All these roots are kind of out and splayed. They're going to get into that nice soil and be super happy. And I think it's important when you're planting perennials not to plant too deep. Some perennials, if you get up around that crown of the plant, it'll get rotten and snap off. Also, when you're mulching and using compost, if that compost is hot, it doesn't burn the plant, but it's not good for that hot material to be up around the plant. So be sure that if you're going to compost this, it's set out for a little bit of time. And the same with mulch. If they're like fresh wood chips out of a chip truck, we brought up our leaf mulch, which I'll talk about in a little bit. You want that stuff to have been out for a little bit of time. You don't want it hot to the touch. So perennials are pretty easy. The soil's already loose. That's about the right height that I want to do. And I'll plant one more so I can mulch this and we can talk about that. And I'm going to be honest to y'all, I have killed boatloads of sedum in my life. And I think the reason for that is too much of a good thing, too much organic matter, and I think too much water is what does that. So as we take care of this, I'm going to be careful not to overdo the love with water. And Alexander, if you can zoom in here, sometimes these variegated plants will kind of revert back to the natural, and you can see there's a little bit of a green there. I'm just going to pinch that off so that doesn't reestablish. And just like we talked about with the Japanese maples this morning, that's the dominant gene in the plant, is to produce that straight green foliage. It's evolved to this nice color that we have here. So I've pinched those off. So that's about the right depth that we have here for me. And one more and we'll mulch. It's kind of nice doing this, nice and quiet out here. I need to do this more. So for sake of example, we've got everything planted. The next thing would be to water things in really good. You've disturbed that root ball. You want to give it a nice drink after you do that. And water deep so that water goes down deeply. You don't want to wash everything off into the bed edge you just made or over the nice wall that you have. And I'll do that at the end of the day. Water everything in, pick up your trash, your pots, your plant tags, that kind of stuff, and you want to put down mulch. What we like to use here, again, because it's free, this is the leaf compost just at a less advanced broken down stage. I love the color of this. I love the way that it smells. It adds a lot of organic matter as it's breaking down. It works good to keep moisture in the soil. It breaks down pretty quick, so we spend a lot of time here mulching all through the garden as we're cleaning up beds and all through the growing season. If you wanted to sustain this a little bit longer, 2 parts leaf compost, 1 part wood chip works really, really good. The wood chips take longer to break down. They hold that compost together, so you're not having to mulch as frequently. That's the best, most cost-effective way to mulch and also to add organic matter to your soil. The leaf compost breaks down, the wood chips do. It's a great way to do that. So I'm going to mulch this. and you want it around the base of the plant, but you don't want to pile it around the base of the plant. We've talked about, and we've all seen mulch volcanoes out in commercial landscapes and in home landscapes, unfortunately, and that's really bad for most plants, trees in particular. So just cover that top of that root ball up with the mulch. That'll keep it moist around the plant. 2 to 3 inches is plenty deep enough. And it gets extra special exciting when you find fire ants in the mulch. And I like to kind of pat it down a little bit just to make it look even. You can do that with a leaf rake or whatever tool might be handy. And that's it. Beds have been prepped. You've got your mulch down for the spring. The next round of things you'll have to do as Mother Nature continues to roll on is deal with weeds and that kind of stuff. We're not going to talk about herbicides or pre-emergence or anything, but that's basic bed prep 101 at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. It's what we do. We don't have any questions, do we?
There were 1.5 questions.
1.5. Let's start with the half question.
The half question, okay, was Barbara wanted to know what was the name of the variegated sedum that you planted.
That's a good question, Barbara. This is one, I'm assuming it's out. It's called Boogie Woogie. That's a pretty good name. This is a Walter's Garden introduction. I'm assuming that.
Would you be able to get something like that?
Where would you be able to get Boogie Woogie? Well, it just so happens coming up in a couple weeks is Raulston Blooms, and we have got these sun-loving perennials, the Agastache included. They're going to be at our plant sale. So if you're not a member, it behooves you to become a member because you get kind of first stab at things. But yeah, they're going to be available at the plant sale this year. We take a lot of time and effort to pick things that are going to do well in most gardens. Passive aggressively and selfishly, we look for things that we like, that we want to kind of spread that joy. All of us kind of together, Mark, Sophia, Tim, and Dennis, kind of put our heads together and kind of figure out what we're going to pick. I like that half a question.
It was good. And another question came in after the half question, so there's even more questions after that.
Okay,
and I
great.
am mic'd here, so you don't have to repeat my question. But
excellent.
Tam was wondering, what about landscape fabric? I have a bunch of it layered all over the perimeter of my house, and it's driving me crazy. Do I need this?
One of the biggest myths in horticulture, I think, for a couple reasons, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox about this. The plastics are horrible as they break down in the environment. They actually form a layer above your soil that impedes the back and forth of organic matter. They do slow water down to a degree, and I was part of some trials in my last job where we looked at landscape fabrics, and it weeps water away because it forms like a channel underneath the mulch that's on top. Inhibits back and forth of nutrients, can move water around in a weird way, and it eventually forms another layer on top of there where weeds come anyway, so it doesn't do anything to keep the weeds at bay. And there's nothing worse than pulling out a dead plant through that plastic and trying to get it to go back down in the ground. It inevitably sticks up and just looks terrible. Don't do it. It's a bad look. It's bad for the environment. It's not good for your plants. My heart goes out to the folks that make it and make a living on it, but it's not something that we recommend to people. That's my nice answer about landscape fabrics.
Very polite of you. Well restrained, Greg.
I try to be as polite as possible through all stages of life.
Absolutely. All right, Susan says that she forgot to get a soil sample from a new bed before she broadcast Hollytone all in it. How long does she need to wait before she does a soil sample?
Hollytone is relatively low in organic matter, It's not going to sway things real drastically. It's typically used to help with plants that like acidic soil. Azaleas, some hollies like it, some camellias, that sort of stuff. If you just broadcast it, keep an eye on your plants. If you start to show signs of stress, then maybe you should do a soil sample. But I would start in the spring next year and start from scratch before you add anything.
Yeah. And if you really are curious about what's going on in your soil, you can still take the soil sample,
Absolutely,
broadcast that hollytone. It'll show up in the soil sample that you've got that amount of fertilizer in there, and you may get a recommendation to add more afterwards. But it'll all be accounted for in the sample.
And you could probably even note that on the sample sheet that you've added something to it, and it'll come up. That's a good point. It's okay to go ahead and do it now, but it's better to kind of start from scratch, and you could probably put that on the sheet.
Yeah, because the whole point of the soil sample is to find out what's going on in the soil.
Yes.
And now that you know that you've broadcast that fertilizer, for sure.
Blake?
Yes, Mark?
Blake, I got texted a question.
Somebody went straight to the top.
Brilliant.
Going back to kind of the soil sample that you started. You were talking about bed chemistry, and I got a text asking if that was a subtle reference to Sabrina Carpenter's hit song Bed Chem.
I don't know who Sabrina Carpenter is. I know there used to be a TV show called Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Maybe?
Sure.
Yeah, not the same. Not the same.
Show
thing.
my name. Not the same. No.
Melissa Joan Hart.
What's that?
Wasn't that the name of the woman in Sabrina the Teenage Witch?
Yes. Yeah.
I grew up in the 90s, y'all.
Yeah, I don't think it's the same thing. I can't even remember what I mentioned about bed chemistry, unless it's the soil aspect of that, or if it's the way that the plants kind of color echo off of each other and kind of go together, or in the words of the Secession of Bloom master himself, Doug Ruin, picking things that look good at different times of the year, and you've got bloom kind of extending. I think that's bed chemistry. At least that's what we're going to say here today.
Cool. Another question has popped into the chat. Susan says, if you have an established perennial bed, but the soil needs improvement, how do you improve the soil without harming the roots of the other plants?
Just adding compost and mulching your garden is going to keep that organic matter and that flora and fauna in the soil kind of doing its thing. Other kinds of cultural things like watering at the right times of the year, not overwatering, not underwatering, so that there's that balance in that soil chemistry also. Those two things are the simplest way to improve plant health care.
Yeah.
And you should be you can take soil samples in those established beds also, and that'll give you a sense of what you need. I don't like to tell people to fertilize unless they need the fertilizer. And some things do, some things don't. I think about some perennials like some of the ornamental grasses that are used to lean soils, and when you fertilize that stuff, they tend to flop or not look good. So that's another case for a soil sample in this situation. But the simple act of broadcasting compost, using some really good organic matter mulch, like the leaf compost, that's going to add a lot of microbes and biostimulants to the soil.
And you don't even need to work that compost in. It's just as the compost naturally breaks down, the chemicals that it's releasing help loosen up the soil structure and just improve.
And that's going to benefit the plants too.
Yeah, for sure. So you're not having to worry about ripping up any roots or anything like that. You're just helping the soil get better. For sure. Awesome. That is all of the questions that we have.
Anybody here? So the question was, I'm taking my soil sample. There might be a couple worms in there, maybe some weeds, maybe some beer bottle caps. If you're at Mark's garden, is that okay to have that in the box? Probably not. They're going to test the soil. Anything else that's in there might kind of impede that whole process. And that's part of mixing that up in a container and then putting it in there is, you don't want rocks in there. You don't want inorganic matter, trash, or anything like that. You want the soil that's from your garden. If it's heavy clay, that's okay. That's part of it. But you want it to look like, like soil that's coming from that substrata. That's important. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for making us do this one.